Good morning, Uganda. Thank you so much for always choosing UBC TV here to inspire you. The show is Good Morning Uganda, and my name is Julie Nantaba Mosisi. Now, Uganda's statutory minimum wage has remained unchanged since the year 1984. And it was, at that time, it was set at 6,000 Uganda shillings per month. That is about $1.60 US dollars per month. But in 2019, Parliament passed a bill proposing a new minimum wage of 136,000 Uganda shillings, which is about $37, but was rejected by the President of Uganda, citing amongst many reasons that this would scare away investors that Uganda is trying to attract. Now, on 1st May 2025, during the Labor Day celebrations in Karamoja region, the President pledged that he would revisit this particular issue with meetings to be held in the cabinet starting this particular month of June. Now, some of the proposed areas of focus in there were sector-based wage structures, phasing out casual labor, but also regulation of exploitative employment agencies in Uganda. And to have a whole and bigger picture on this particular issue of minimum wage, in studio with me is Mr. Mauku Richard Moses, who is the General Secretary of HTS-Union, but also the Treasurer General of Notice. So join in on the conversation as we discuss this pertinent issue that actually touches every single individual for as long as you work in Uganda. Good morning, Mr. Mauku Richard Moses.
Good morning, Julie.
Thank you for coming.
You're most welcome.
You should become a presenter already because right, we are so used to always having you speak into matters of importance.
Thank you so much for that recognition. I want to take this occasion to greet Ugandans, more especially the workers.
Yes.
Who are my brothers and sisters. I salute you all and appreciate you for the work that you do to sustain this economy. On the topic before us for discussion, one is to just echo what Julie has said, that many years ago we had a minimum wage, which became stale over the times.
Right.
And as of now, Uganda does not have a minimum wage, despite the fact that most of the countries within East Africa and the world over have minimum wage with which they work. A minimum wage is that amount of money that is pronounced by law, that no person employed by another shall earn a wage less than that has been pronounced by law of that given country. It's unfortunate that we don't have that wage, and the absence of such a wage breeds a situation where people are exploited, those that are in employment, especially the people that are unskilled. Minimum wage is a very important aspect in employment because it predetermines that amount of money that a person must earn as a minimum.
Right.
And its absence has a lot of negative consequences to those persons that are employed. It is also reality that we also have what we call a living wage. A minimum wage is different from a living wage. A living wage would be that amount of money that could be good enough or adequate for the person in employment to fend for his or her basic needs. Does this money allow me as an employee to pay for a house? It is expected that I may not necessarily have a house as an unskilled employee. So does this money that is paid to me as a salary allow me to pay rent for a house? Does it allow me to feed myself? Does it allow me to treat myself in a given month? Say I got malaria in a month. Does it allow me to buy clothing for myself? Does it allow me to take care of my small family? So that would be a living wage. If you take a consideration, in Uganda, most of the people, the biggest chunk of the people employed actually don't earn a living wage. We earn far below what is required for us to take care of our basic needs. So it is very important and necessary that government considers. We have been pushing this issue for a long time. For me, I joined the labor unions in the late 90s. And I found this discussion on table. There was a research that was done in 1996 by the bipartite partners, the employers organization, that is Federation of Uganda Employers, and NOTU. They did the research and filed those findings with the government for purposes of ensuring that Uganda establishes or pronounces a minimum wage. It is also a very good indicator for an economy that is growing. But in its absence, you cannot judge certain facts. Very many times and many years, I so happened to go to Geneva for the International Labour Conference. Actually, we came back this weekend for the conference for this year. It is one of the things that are being discussed even now, living wage. And living wage feeds into minimum wage. It just improves the status of minimum wage. Minimum wage should not be static. If government pronounced a minimum wage today, this minimum wage should be seen to grow each year because the economic trends also change over the years. The inflation grows. The standards of living keep changing. So the minimum wage equally, even when pronounced, it should never be static if it is going to be effective and to help the people that is intended to be helped by this minimum wage. So we just want to appreciate that President Museveni this time, after a very long time, is accepting that it is necessary and important that we now pronounce a minimum wage.
Right.
This discussion has been on for a long time, but fortunately on the 30th of April this year, when the President met the tripartite partners, that is Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, Federation of Uganda Employers, and the Workers' Federations. Arising from the discussions that ensued during that meeting, he came to realize that it is necessary that we have this minimum wage pronounced. Arrangements have already started into how to get this minimum wage established. And these arrangements are in concurrence with what His Excellency has guided. We, as the Ministry of Labour, it's a requirement in law that the ministry should first announce or put in place a minimum wages board, advisory board, which is also not there, though it is provided for by the law. So that those processes have already started. They are seeking for nominations of the persons that are going to sit on that board, because it is through that board that a minimum wage should be established. They should guide the process of establishment of the minimum wage. We also have another council that advises the board, which is also currently not appointed by the same ministry. So we have, actually we took off time while we were in Geneva at our embassy and had those discussions with the minister, Federation of Uganda Employers, and our services, NOTU and COFTU. So we had a separate discussion as a follow-up.
Right.
So we are certain that now we are going to have the minimum wage established in Uganda. We want to only urge those that are concerned to fast track the process, because it has been long waited.
Surely, indeed.
Sure. So we have hope for the workers of this country that we shall have a minimum wage that establishes the minimum pay below which they cannot earn.
Now, I wonder if during those discussions that are obviously now going to start to engage into the process, if the living wage should also be discussed at the same time alongside the minimum wage, because Uganda right now is out of the LDCs, low developing countries, as announced by the Honorable Minister Kasaija over the reading of the national budget. So, in your opinion, do you think that we must first have the conversation of the minimum wage driven home and then have the conversation of the living wage follow, or they should walk hand in hand?
Living wage is an obligation of the trade unions, and we do it. A living wage is negotiated in most cases. When trade unions sit with employers to negotiate collective bargaining agreements, one of the things that they do negotiate is a living wage, because salaries are improved during the process of negotiation, among the other aspects of employment. Those collective bargaining agreements that we negotiate focus on three things: the aspect of how somebody gets into employment, the aspect of how somebody stays in employment, and also the aspect of how one leaves employment. The three things must happen: entry, stay, and exit. So there are parameters, there are conditions, there are terms that obtain from all the three processes. There are procedures written in the law that we try to explain further and improve. What are these requirements? The law may provide minimums. For example, we have collective bargaining agreements that reduce the probationary period from the 1 year to merely 3 months. Because different sectors have different character or characteristics.
Right.
Would you need to examine somebody working as probably a waiter for 1 year to understand whether this person will work or not? You don't need a year. That you can even do in a week to assess that this person can do my work. So the collective bargaining agreement can reduce some of the provisions in the Mother Act to make it practical to the practice, to the service, and to the industry. If you are a packer, your work is to pack biscuits. Do I need to take 1 year examining or assessing whether you can pack biscuits or not?
No.
So you will never find a CBA that says that probationary period for a person in this position is going to be 6 months and it can be extended for another month. But for public service, sometimes they want to assess people for one full year. We don't do that. So we are in one way or the other improving the terms of and the conditions of employment. When it gets to salaries, the salaries of a person who is a union member for whom negotiations are done to improve or better the terms and conditions of employment, the salary will always be increased each time these two parties meet to agree. If the company is growing, then the individual must grow with the company.
Right.
If the profitability of the company is low, then it should be understood and the parties say, for this year, we cannot increase salary. We cannot increase this because the profitability of this company has equally either stayed stagnant or has reduced. But where the company's profitability improve, then equally the terms and conditions of employment, the benefits of the workers should also be seen to increase. And those are matters of negotiation. That is provided for by the law. So you will find that most of the people whose terms and conditions are set out in a manner of negotiation, they have their living wage improve each other time. Those that, even the issue of minimum wage does not concern workers who are union members. No, because the unions establish minimum wage for company by company each time they engage. But we represent all workers. So that is why we are craving to ensure that we have a minimum wage for all workers.
Right. And
those that qualify for it. But there are many who don't qualify for minimum wage. When you go to civil service, you may not even want, you may not have any civil servant who will be a beneficiary of the minimum wage because their salaries are set somewhere. There is a structure which sets salaries for public service. So minimum wage is basically for the wider scope of employees of this country in the private sector.
Right.
Private sector and the informal economy employs most of the Ugandans.
Now, speaking of negotiations, what are the main economic arguments, those who probably advise the president against the minimum wage, do you think they are raising, and how are you negotiating against them to show them that this is the picture you're looking at?
Well, one thing is correct. The president, in his opinion,
right,
wanted to first have more people in employment before they set minimum wage. That has been his argument.
Yes.
That he wanted to first attract more and more investors. He creates more and more employment, and then thereafter we can talk about setting a minimum wage. It is good that he has accepted that now we can have a minimum wage. We have enough investors here. And serious investors never fear minimum wage. Any serious investor cannot fear minimum wage. Because if you are not coming to exploit people, why would you fear to pay the minimum? Because minimum wage is all over the world. And there are countries that have developed better than Uganda, but they have minimum wage.
Right.
Kenya has a minimum wage. I do not think that our economy is bigger than that of Kenya because they have a minimum wage. The minimum wage of Kenya is pronounced every 1st May. It is reviewed every 1st May by the president. But it is an economy that is higher than that of Uganda. Equally, that of Tanzania, they have a minimum wage. It does not mean that they are poor or they are not doing well. So it could have been an encumbrance, probably in our own predicaments as Uganda, but now we have enough investors. We can now start to have the minimum wage so that those who are coming in will come knowing that in Uganda the minimum wage is this. The only problem is we need to set a minimum wage that is not uniform. So we convinced the president that we need a minimum wage that is sectoral. Because one which was uniform, like the one of the Obote's regime, was unrealistic. A worker, even a domestic worker, for our case here, is a worker, and the minimum wage will affect this person as well, who is living in my house, and even that person working in a factory. So the best way is to set a minimum wage that is sectoral. You focus on service. What would be the minimum wage for service industry? What would be the minimum wage for agriculture workers? What would be the minimum wage for hospitality and maybe hotel sector, tourism? What would be the minimum wage for domestic workers, those informal economy workers,
right,
who are doing employment with direct relationship between employer and employee. There are those, many of the informal sector workers who don't earn a salary, they pay themselves. But there are those in the informal economy who actually have employers. So that is the type of minimum wage that must be pronounced in Uganda. Not one figure, but different figures for different sectors. And after a clear assessment on to whether this minimum wage is going to have negative or positive effects to the development of the economy.
Right. Now that would bring me to a question and wonder, with the current state that we are, where there's no minimum wage, do you think there are sectors that are being affected more than others?
Definitely, yes.
For example, elaborate.
When you get to factories, right here, in Uganda we have a threshold for pay as you earn.
Yes.
There are people who have come here and told lies to government that we are going to create 1,000 jobs. And then Honorable Kasaija gets very happy that he's going to earn a lot of money. Out of 1,000 jobs, when you go there, you know, we have a problem that here we only focus ourselves on environmental assessment. We don't do labor assessment when people are going to invest here.
Right.
There is no employment and labor assessment. But government enters into these contracts using a lot of our money. And the person who is coming here to invest gives figures, projections that are very beautiful. 1,000 jobs. Of the 1,000 jobs, we don't know how many of these jobs are going to be permanent, how many of them are going to be contractual, how many of these jobs are going to be casual, and how much time shall these jobs exist. You get? A person comes to employ others, and then instead of directly employing, is having labor brokers on the side waiting to give him workers. And out of the 1,000, 800 are not paid by this investor. They are paid by a labor broker.
Wow.
800 workers do not even qualify to pay as you earn because their salary, in the absence of a minimum wage, do not even qualify them to pay as you earn because they are earning below the threshold. And all the 800 workers are not benefiting government. 100 workers of these people are from the native country. Those who earn high, all heads of departments are from the native country where this program came from. Those that could be paying some taxes. And a very few of the Ugandan workers would also be qualifying. So you have a project that is employing 1,000. That deceived the government that it will employ 1,000, but actually it is employing 200. Only 200, and out of the 200, 100 are not nationals. So in essence, the people who make economic sense are merely 100 out of 1,000. So these are some of the problems that we are facing as a country.
Right.
The government is not benefiting adequately from these projects.
And neither
the workers are not adequately benefiting.
Yes.
They are just growing in age, but they are not earning.
Busy.
Yeah. If you cannot be paid 235, then they don't even, these casual employees are not paying to NSSF. They don't contribute. So even Social Security has locked them out because of the format, because of lack of having a minimum wage. We would have a minimum wage that allows everybody to pay to government, pay as you earn. Government would then earn a lot of money through pay as you earn. It would be a minimum wage that allows everybody to contribute to his or her Social Security. And that is also money that is being used by government. Much as the money is being kept for me to earn it after 55 years, during the time I start contributing to the time I earn that money, government is doing a lot of programs with that money.
Right.
So these are all economic and social benefits to government if you pronounce a minimum wage.
This bill is to be retabled very soon. What do you think is the difference between the bill that was tabled in 2013 and the bill that might be tabled in this year or thereafter, really?
One thing that I want to agree is much as the bill that was tabled or that was even passed had some pitfalls, it was better than having no minimum wage bill. We are only going to improve, and it will make work easier for those of us who are involved in the process because we already have something that we are going to build on to improve.
Right.
So the process is expected to take a shorter period of time. There is a framework that we are going to look through and make those improvements and adjustments. Because even the figures that we had proposed then now don't make good economic sense as of now, because there are a number of years that have passed.
12 years.
When it was passed in 2019, it was actually started many years ago. You get? So even the figures we are talking about then were not 2019 figures.
Right.
They were figures of either 2014 or, you know. So we are going to review all these figures with evidence. and using the current economic situation to determine the figures that we are going to propose to government to ensure that we get this bill
We
concluded.
are looking at the matter of the minimum wage bill in Uganda. Uganda is the only East African country that does not have a minimum wage. And at first, this bill was tabled in the year 2013, passed in 2019, rejected by the president. And on 1st May, he pledged that he would look into this matter. And it's what we're looking into, seeing as it's about to be retabled anytime soon. It's the conversation that we are delving into. And in studio with us is Mauku Richard Moses, who is the General Secretary of HTS-Union, as well as Treasurer General Notu. You did mention that you would talk about HTS-Union.
Well, HTS-Union, many people do not understand what it is when you do the abbreviation, but it's a long name.
Which is?
Uganda Hotels, Food, Tourism, Supermarkets, and Allied Workers Union.
Wow.
So we organize from the biggest scope.
Right. Right. Very interesting. So let's continue this conversation and look at the strategies that the union has or has a plan to use to ensure that the bill is passed and implemented.
Well, I would say that we have not slept for a long time.
Indeed. We've been seeing the activity.
Yeah.
Yes.
One, we continue to lobby government.
Right.
But we also push internationally. These matters are found somewhere in Geneva. Even when we don't file an official complaint, we discuss them the other side.
Right.
Some of the issues that are still pending. And if nothing is done, we shall then bring an official complaint in Geneva. So we have been doing a number of things, and we are also in touch with the employers' organization. On several occasions, we have agreed with the Federation of Uganda Employers and NOTU on a joint communique, on joint position papers about minimum wage, among other things. So it finds a fertile ground. Many of the times we have discussed this matter, we are always in agreement with employers, employers' organization. And actually, most of the employers individually also believe that it is important and necessary to have a minimum wage in Uganda.
Right.
So it's not going to be a difficult task. It's only providing information that is good enough for us to make our positions before we present to the cabinet.
Right.
It's not going to be a very hard task for us.
On that note, what role do you think the public should play in enabling this bill to be passed?
I would wish to call on the public to speak to their representatives in Parliament. Because all done, ours is to feed into Parliament. It is still Parliament to discuss the final draft.
Right.
It is Parliament to pass the law. So I want to urge the public or encourage the public to speak to their members of Parliament to pick interest in this minimum wages bill. Because it affects every person. Even when you are earning whatever you earn as a member of Parliament, at least you have a relative who is affected by this, the absence of a minimum wage. It might be your daughter, it might be your auntie, it might be, but you have somebody who, and even the people that elect you are victims of this situation. So it is important for us all to understand and appreciate that we need this bill passed into law and convince the president, all of us, to ensure that we have this minimum wage bill. Because it adds on the economic...
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Because one thing that the president has been telling Ugandans is that he wants more Ugandans to join the money economy, the cash economy. Ugandans are not going to join the cash economy when you don't even have a minimum wage. When people are paying what the employer thinks like. So it is important that it is going to help the president achieve his goal of catching many people into the cash economy.
How will it be monitored?
The Ministry of Labor is there, and that is its responsibility. The trade unions are on the other side to monitor. The employers' organizations are also the other side. So monitoring, there is a mechanism already set out in the legal framework and by the existence of the tripartite partners, government, employers, and the workers' organizations. So monitoring is going to be easier. And there is enforcement that is done. We also have police. People will be told what to do and how to do it, where to report cases of non-compliance.
Right.
Yes, please.
Very interesting. With what Mr. Mauku has said, it looks like if this bill is actually put into action and accepted by the president, it will eventually do what Honorable Kasaija usually does for the economy. But thank you so much, Mr. Mauku Richard Moses, for coming through for this conversation. What would be your parting shot as we close this conversation?
My parting shot is those that are in employment, I want to advise them that look out for unions that shall represent your interests. Because it is both God-given, but it's also provided for by the laws that those people that are in employment reserve the liberty to be represented by others. That is joining trade unions of their choice so that you can be represented at all levels.
Right.
And for those of our brothers and sisters that are in the informal economy, we want to pray for you to talk to your members of parliament everywhere so that we ensure that we have the minimum wage bill passed into law by parliament, and that should be the duty of everybody. So I want to urge everybody to be vigilant on ensuring that we have this bill, and also ask people we are getting into the time of voting for our leaders. Elect the right persons. Do not elect people who have money, but elect people who shall represent you. When you continue asking for money from these people that we are electing, actually they tend to only go and pay back themselves and not do the duty that they are supposed to do for us. So it is important that we focus on people who are actually having the sense of representation, not necessarily those that have more money to give us.
Right.
Because we instead sell our rights because we are demanding for monies and not service. So it is important for the Ugandans to take it that what is most important is for you to focus on leaders and inform them at the time you are electing them, to encourage them to go and provide service, but not go and look for money. There is no one single person that is going to develop this country. That is the duty of the whole government. But the person you are electing as an LOC, as a councillor, as an MP, as a president, is that person who is meant to represent your interests in totality, not paying your salary. If you want money, look for a job. If you want representation, elect the right leader. That is my
very profound parting shot there. I cannot even say another word or add to that. It's straight, clear, and rightfully driven home by Mr. Mauku Richard Moses, who is the General Secretary of HTS-Union as well as Treasurer General of NOTO. He's been with us in studio today talking about workers' welfare, a bill that is the minimum wage bill is going to be retabled, and he was giving us an insight into this particular conversation. That's it for Good Morning Uganda today. Thank you so much for being on UBC TV. GMU Extra will be coming your way with Robert Travel Nyonyintono. Let's do this same time tomorrow on a Wednesday. Good morning.